Hi, welcome to the next instalment of our new entrance calendar. Today we are looking at when to wean. Quite a few considerations to bear in mind. The first consideration would be to think about the market that you're looking for to put your lambs to. Is it a store market? Is it a finished market? When is that sale going to be? And you need to consider the weaning check. So for example, if the store sale is in 2 weeks' time, do you really want to wean your lambs so close to the sale where they would have a weaning check, where they would lose a bit of condition and they wouldn't be looking at their best when you sell them? Fairly similar to the finished lambs, if you've got finished lambs that are very, very close to being ready to go finished, you don't really want to wean them a week, 10 days before they're going to go, because again, you'll have that loss of condition that you'd have with store lambs. So dependent when the sale is, you need to consider that for your weaning. So that would be your first consideration. You'd also have to consider what condition your ewes are in at present as well. So if your ewes are on the lean side, so less than 2.5 body condition score, then you would probably want to look at weaning them slightly earlier, which would allow you then for the ewes to regain condition before tupping season. So you're really looking ahead, you're looking at this year's lambs, but you're also looking ahead to what sort of crop lambs you're going to get next year as well. On that as well would be the lamb performance. So if your lambs are growing at less than 200 grams per day, then they would probably benefit from weaning as well. The optimum time for weaning would be approximately 12 weeks of age. It would vary in different circumstances, but at that time you would really be looking at seeing what condition your ewes are in and what condition your lambs are in. So aside from the actual animals, there's also the grassland. So dependent on if the grass quantity is poor, then again you'd want to consider weaning. Once weaned, ewe intakes can be restricted to free up more grass for your lambs. Grass quality needs to come into play as well, because if the quality is depleted on the grazing platform, you'd want to consider weaning. Lambs could then be moved to better quality pasture, or it might be rotational grazing that would benefit the lambs when you're wanting them to have the best quality grass as possible. So quite a few considerations to take into account for when to wean. There's also quite a few things that you can do to hopefully minimise the stress at weaning time for your lambs. So the first thing would be familiarity. So if you can keep the ewes on poorer pasture, which is away from where they've been, and the lambs would stay on the pasture that they've been with the ewes on. So that gives them a familiarity where they've been, and also knowing where maybe a water availability is as well. They're on the same type of grass for at least a week after weaning, and that will help their stress levels. Distance would be another thing, if possible, and it's not always possible, that you would be able to move the ewes as far away as possible. So ideally, if you had a poor area of land quite a bit away from your main holding, that the ewes could be moved to allow them to dry off, and the lambs would be able to stay so they wouldn't be able to hear one another. That would also help to reduce the stress levels as well. Problem when weaning sometimes is that you have them in, you have all the sheep in, so you think, well, I'll do some other tasks with the lambs as well, maybe a drench or a vaccination. So again, that's going to add to their stress when they've been weaned. So ideally, if you were going to do that, either do it when they're still with the mothers, maybe a week before weaning, or leave it until they've been weaned for maybe a couple of weeks when they've settled down. That would also help for the stress levels. Dependent on where the lambs are going to go, if they're going to maybe a specialist finishing crop, you would also want to maybe introduce them to that before they're weaned, and that would reduce any problems then. And also, where you put your ewes is important, because you want them to dry off on poorer pasture, poorer quality forage, which would hopefully reduce mastitis risk for the ewes as well. So quite a few things you could do to hopefully reduce the stress of weaning, and in turn that would reduce the check on the lambs as well. And just in summary, bear in mind where your end market is and when it is. Think about your fodder supply and your ewe condition. So that could be done if you were handling sheep prior to weaning. You could get a good idea in terms of how lambs are doing and also what sort of condition the ewes are in. And as we've mentioned, if at all possible, try and minimise potential stresses. You're not going to perhaps minimise everything, but there are certain ways you can. Some things might not be practical to minimise. If you're on a smaller holding and all your land is in one block, it's going to be very difficult to put much distance between the ewes and lambs after weaning. If there is options to try and minimise the stress, then it's better to do so.